I remember being 5 years old and swinging and talking to God. "Mom, you know that's not normal, right?" was always my response to her when she told me this story. And indeed, it was not your average childhood upbringing. My mother grew up on a faith healer farm, led by the divine healer, Dr. Berthold Knocke, near Sweet Home, Texas. She had nothing but positive stories to tell, of learning to play piano in their music room, in addition to witnessing the healings of many folks who came from all over and lined up in their cars to see Dr. Knocke for healing of their physical and mental illnesses. Here were the beginnings of her life and love for God that were seeds planted by growing up here with this family. Sure, they had their share of hard work to do, as this was the 1930s and 40s during the Great Depression era. Dr. Knocke had cured my grandmother of her, quote, side stitch, unquote, and my grandfather, Arthur Lange, needed work, so they found home working with this healer. Arthur became the chauffeur to the doctor, who didn't drive, and also he looked after the engine room, keeping the generators working amongst other countless duties. My mother's siblings did not share her positive memories of living and growing up here. They resented being isolated from the town and not receiving more than a 6th grade education. And so began the task of uncovering the compelling truth about the life and time growing up working alongside Dr. Knocke. My mother's personal recollections contrasted sharply from my aunts and uncles. We were even given stern warnings that some say they don't want to talk about it and to avoid asking him questions. This led to even more curiosity on my part, and it continued to build throughout the years. One of my sisters, Shonda, who's a newspaper reporter, interviewed one of the eldest Knocke children along with my cousin, and they received a first-hand account via a live tape recording that's truly fascinating to listen to. Michael DuPont, her boyfriend at the time, also interviewed my Uncle Benny, who did not like growing up there, and he tried to spin that Knocke was a, quote, witch doctor, unquote, and stole money when all other accounts reported that only donations were accepted and that there was never a charge. Yet another cousin acknowledged that although he did indeed heal many, he still considered him a crook in his own mind. Fast forward to now, in 2024, and the technology that we have via social media. Although for the past 20 years that I've researched, it's been hard to dig up any real information besides basic info about Dr. Knocke, I put up a post in the Lavaca County Historical page and found lots of curious readers with positive and negative comments, and many of my contacts. Interested folks, including locals and neighbors, and even some of the grandchildren of this Texas healer, emerged with additional information and questions. I spent countless hours talking, texting, and sharing with inquiring minds and found great inspiration and appreciation for what life in the 1930s was all about in Lavaca County on this mysterious farm. Despite all of the stories swirling around this divine healer, there were some basic facts that all can agree on. B.A. Knocke was a farmer in Sweet Home, Texas, with 4 children out of his 9 total, at the time that he had an experience in his fields. It was reportedly, quote, raining corn, unquote, and he came into the house and told his wife that he was afraid of what was happening and had a weird feeling. He insisted that God told him to become a healer and had said, "Do it, or I will destroy your family." Annie suggested he lie down and that he was probably just tired, but other family thought he was mental and wanted to have him institutionalized. She said no way, but they did contact the authorities. He was put in jail for 3 days so he would not harm his children. There he slept and went 3 days with no food, and that is when he reportedly received his divine healing power. Berthold did indeed follow the voice and started the healing and did not ever farm again. God chose B.A. Knocke to heal, and that is what he did from then on. Berthold and Annie moved into the big house, as they called it, which was built in approximately 1927 and is still standing today. As word passed, he then expanded and eventually built 12 cabins on the property for his patients to stay in, sometimes for a night or 2, and sometimes for weeks. The cars and buggies would line up for miles along the road by the house, waiting for their treatments, and there was a long covering over the driveway that was erected to keep folks cool and out of the weather so they could walk around while waiting their turn. Dr. Knocke never charged any money, and it was first come, first serve on the porch for his treatments. He worked 7 days a week. Donations were accepted and welcome, and soon the family started selling bread, butter, sheep, and cut wool and milk to the patients. They grew hay for the cattle and sweet cane for molasses. Eventually, there was a small grocery store, a cafe to feed the hungry travelers, school, a church, and even a jailhouse on the property. People seeking these treatments traveled from all over, so they needed to provide for them. A standard treatment consisted of Dr. Knocke holding the back of a patient's neck, and another hand was placed on their forehead, and he would give his diagnosis. He would ask, "Where does it hurt?" or intuitively sense it on other occasions. He had a gift, a spiritual gift, and it was a high gift. He then would say the Lord's Prayer 3 times very fast, hardly understandable, much like an auctioneer. Some of his remedies are still used today. He would sometimes have them take warm olive oil internally or apply it to their stomach or back. Apple cider vinegar with honey was another cure for some. For cuts and wounds, he would use kerosene, and surprisingly, even phone healings were available over their old crank telephone in the hallway. As with any doctor, not all cases were healed. The doctor would tell the patient if there was nothing more that he could do and refer them to seek other treatment. There was recollections and criticisms of folks dying in their cars while waiting, as many times the faith healer was their last resort when other doctors could not help. Surprisingly, all of the mental patients were reportedly healed. Some of them were kept in their jailhouse and had to be restrained initially. However, they would need to be, quote, walked, unquote, around the property by the eldest son, Grover, if restrained for too long. Annie Mae, the eldest daughter, recalls during her voice-recorded interview with my sister that her father was telling them at dinner one night about a sick child. The mother had brought the girl in for healing, and he could see that the mother did not want her. The child was strangely plagued with chronic illnesses and eventually died. He suspected the child took on the emotional abuse as physical symptoms, and this illustrated the mind-body-spirit connection, which we know is true today. It was days such as that where she remembers her dad taking ice baths to try to recharge the energy that was taken out of him during these healings. My grandfather, Arthur Lange, also went by the name of Otto. As the foreman, he kept the engine room working as it had 2 gas generators that needed to be maintained and provided the power for this entire community. He was also Dr. Knocke's chauffeur and drove him everywhere he needed to go. My grandmother, Millie, helped with the afternoon tea and cake, or Kaffeeklatsch, as they called it in German. Interestingly enough, my mother had the same recollection of singing and dancing and learning to play music there as Annie, the eldest daughter of Knocke. There was a Mexican family that lived in a tent because they could not afford the cabin rent, and for about 2 months they lived there and brought lots of music, singing and dancing in the dirt with lanterns at night. They'd make tortillas and beans and serve it to whoever was present. My mother loved this. Only good memories remain for my mother of this musical energy that was brought into their lives. My mother, Leona, learned to play piano there and write with beautiful handwriting as a result of Alberta, one of the Knocke children who taught and inspired her. My uncle Benny Lange also played drums, and my grandfather played trumpet. The Knockes had a band called the Red, White, and Blue Band that played polka and waltz music and performed all over the region. So many of them learned how to play music that another band with the younger generation was additionally formed called the Junior Band. My Aunt Ruby played mandolin, my Uncle Benny the drums, and the eldest Knocke daughter, Annie Mae, played the guitar. There was a schoolhouse that taught the children, and my mother mentioned many times that she only received a 6th grade education. This did not bother her at all, but there was resentment from my uncle that it was all he received. He also resented that he received no pay for his work on the farm. Although there was a music teacher, one of my aunts would recount that they were not much of a teacher. However, many, including my mother, went on to play in several bands and would sing with her sister after they left the farm at age 16. Notably, my mother played piano and sang in the Southern Airs, a popular band that played around local halls, with her brother, my Uncle Benny. She also performed with Geo Lemke and Rockabilly Hall of Famer Arnold Parker, including singing for patients that came home from the war in the Veterans Hospital in San Antonio. Every Thursday night, there was a ministry series. Folks would sit in the big hallway on benches and listen to a sermon. Annie, Millie, and Maggie would serve sandwiches and tea. And of course, there was always a large Sunday dinner. People brought food and cakes and were all served in the house. That is, until the house became too small for the crowds. It was then that the church was built, and they had travelers from afar to attend the every other Sunday services. The Knocke family was vegetarian for health reasons. It was said that they did not eat any warm-blooded animal. They had communal shared gardens, fruits, and watermelon. There were also ducks, geese, deer, pheasants, and peacocks in their own little zoo that was created for patients to enjoy as they waited. Another interesting practice was that all who lived on the farm had a special color that they were assigned to wear in clothing. It was explained by Annie Mae in her interview that it was much like it matched the personality of each individual. My mother's color was blue. Someone else's was gray. The girls also did not cut their hair, as it was known as their crown and glory. My mother finally cut her waist-length braids after she left the farm at age 16 after Knocke's death. Dr. Knocke first got into trouble during World War II when he told several of his draft-eligible followers, including his own sons, that they did not need to register. A few of them went to prison, and the others got work detail as conscientious objectors. The feds tried to get Dr. Knocke on tax charges, and that is when he formed the First Divine Association, chartering it as an official religion. The entrance sign is still there to be seen today. Despite all the divine healings that took place, Knocke was not without the naysayers. Although many were quoted as being witnesses to healings, and some thought of him as a, quote, miracle worker, unquote, others held on to beliefs that he swindled folks and he was a sham or even a witch doctor who robbed folks of their money, although he never charged. Donations, however, were accepted. If the healed wanted to leave donations, that was permissible. How else would he keep his practice running with his grocery store and housing and all that he provided? Why would accepting the generosity of deeply grateful folks be looked down upon? Why? Because their interpretation was of him, not his behavior. The doctor performed the same service to all, yet those who believed thought he was from God, and those who didn't believe thought he was evil and wanted him condemned. Each of these responses are to the same behavior. Their personal interpretation is what makes all the difference in each person's accounts of their story. Hence the best part of all of the reported accusations against him. I received emails from contacts on the historical page for Lavaca County stating, "I'll never set foot in that house after what I've heard." But then they surprisingly couldn't share a single story as to why. I was told stories of teenagers going into the cemetery where he was buried to see if they could get him to rise from the dead. Remember seances? There were also stories of his followers believing that he would come back to life on the dance floor the night that he died there dancing. Some said that they kept his body at home for 3 days, hoping he would rise from the dead there. A granddaughter did indeed confirm that although it is true the body was kept, it's because it was customary at the time to allow for visitation before having the body buried. Another in my family reportedly accused him of swindling our grandmother's dowry, although he would admit later that most of the money was returned after Knocke's death. Still others speculated on the night of his death that he was dancing with a mysterious woman in black, but no other information was provided on who it was or what it even implied. There are heavy demonic stories that swirl amongst their own grandchildren about a dark cloud in the bedroom where their mothers birthed their firstborn in that big house. And another from a family member about when he was jailed and supernaturally broke out of the handcuffs, much to the surprise of the jailers as he walked out towards them. Despite all the accusations and stories, the only proven charges against the divine healer were that he did indeed convince some men, even his own sons, to dodge the draft. However, could these men not enlist if they wanted to? We all have choices. I know my Uncle Benny did. He chose to enlist and go off to the war using his own integrity. Still another account was at a hearing at one of the draft dodgers in Austin, Texas, where he presented an affidavit from a Dr. Harper that stated Knocke was no faith healer. He said he was a witch doctor, whom Dr. Harper claimed that he had trained himself using the 6th and 7th books of Moses. Knocke was angry at the accusation and wanted to confront Dr. Harper himself, but the story mysteriously goes on to say that Dr. Harper died that night. Meanwhile, the feds were trying to get the draft dodgers to say that Knocke told them not to enlist in the war, but no one ever admitted to him or turned him in. Then they tried to get him on tax charges, so that's when he formed the First Divine Association, chartering it as an official religion. We have interesting photos with the signatures of my great-grandparents on the membership cards, confirming they were indeed belonging to this association. It was also told to me by my mother and siblings that my grandmother Lange had a nervous breakdown as a result of the members being isolated from the outside world and her family members who did not live there. There are multiple accounts of seeing bags of money being stored in or carried out of the big 6-bedroom house. But again, no sources seem to be able to say where it went or what happened to it after Knocke's death. Wasn't that the practice of the days to store and hide money in this way during those times of general mistrust of banking after the Depression? Or was there truly a bigger, sinister side to the stories of unaccounted for treasures buried somewhere that has not been proven or discovered? As you listen to this never-before-told story, through the many accounts and divided truths, you can hear this controversial Texas faith healer did touch so many lives in many, many ways. For most, it was gratefulness for the actual healing and a greater faith and belief in God. For some, it was a victimized state of being, distrust, and feeling cheated. And for others, a simple fascination with these elaborate and frankly quite intriguing stories that have been only heard and repeated snippets of. For me, as an active listener for my whole life, it's been a true pleasure to speak to the descendants and relatives and listen to the first-hand account on the cassette taped recording of the eldest Knocke daughter's interview that have provided the clarity and closure I have searched for all along. All sides of all stories are true and valid for those who actually lived and experienced them and cared enough to share them with me. I only wish I could have met him myself.
I'm going to say it like this, and that's going to be weird to you guys. But anyway, he was busy planting his corn. That's what he was doing. And so as he was planting his corn, all of a sudden, all around him, it was like corn falling everywhere. All around him, corn. And so it scared him. He didn't know what was going on, so he checked his tractor and everything to see if it was leaking or whatever, but it was more or less raining corn. So he went home and he told Mama, which is Annie, and he said, Annie, I feel afraid about something because I don't know what's happening. He said, because this came down and I don't know what's happening. She says, well, you may be tired, let's have your dinner and you lay down and rest. He says, no, because I have this weird feeling. And so then from then on, his folks considered him to be a little on the insane side for some of the things he was saying, and like the corn raining down and things like that. So they was going to put him in an institution. But Mom and them said, no way. But then all of a sudden, there were a lot, his folks reported this to the authorities. And so when the authorities got a hold of it, they came to the house and said they was going to take him in to jail because they didn't want him hurting those kids. And so he was in jail like for 3 days, and that's where he got his divine healing from, because he slept the whole 3 days. He didn't eat, he didn't do anything, he just slept. Because that's where he was getting what he needed to be a divine healer. You know, Moses' time, you know, all of those. Look how he got his. Joseph, look how he got his. He was put in prison. He was tied with chains. But through this, he had to become an Egyptian in order for him to learn, to find out, because his nation went dry. In other words, they didn't have enough to eat anymore. So Joseph became an interpreter, dream interpreter for the big king. And that put him in the king's house. And when he did, he made him a king. And by doing so, his brothers, they came to beg wheat and stuff. Now that's in Genesis, if y'all want to read that. And the wheat and stuff, he says, well, I'll sell it to you, but I'm going to sell it to you very high. His brothers didn't recognize him because he was dressed like an Egyptian. But toward the end, he says, do y'all know who I am? And they says, no. And he says, I'm your brother, who you went back, because see, they sold him to the camel herders because they didn't like, because the father kind of favored Joseph a little bit. And they went ahead and killed a goat and everything and put the blood on his little jacket and said that the animals got him, and that he was dead. So that's how you get this sort of thing, you know, that inside of the spiritual thing. But I think my father was a hard man. He was a strong man. He didn't deviate too much. Like sometimes if somebody says, well, do this or do that, I say, well, okay, let's do it, which is really not good to do all the time. You know, you get talked into something and you say, wish like hell I'd never come, you know, because it wasn't right. And so, but that's the kind of guy he was, straightforward. And that's when the people heard about him, about where they could be cured without the doctor. Then it told him, if you don't take this, I will destroy your family, the 4 children and mama. And so in that case, I'm scared to death, so okay, you know, whatever. You know, if something tells me, hey, this is bad, you can't do this. I mean, that's just the way it worked. He had a lot of patients that needed to stay. In other words, they needed 3 or 4 days with him, maybe a week. And so that's when he was trying y'all some cabins. And so to some, he couldn't leave them in the cabins with their folks, so at night he would have to pin them up, hug, worse. And there was, now my memory again, there's 2 in particular. One of them was a gentleman, one of them was a black lady. And she was strong as a whip. But Rover, the oldest boy, would have to take them out of there if they had to stay in there too long and walk them so they get some fresh air. And this colored girl, she cussed a lot, and she cussed him out, and she'd spit in his face, and he said, you do that one more time, I'm going to slap the hell out of you. And she did, and he did. Every one of those mental patients got well. They knew then finally where they were, what they were doing, who their folks were. One gentleman, I think he came from, I don't know, Wharton or one of those places. But anyway, a lot of times we would go in the room to watch Papa. We were kids. Mm-hmm. He would let us in there for a while, not long. And this one of them, he was not real mentally, but he was. And so when Papa would do some of this, well, I guess when that hits, that nerve hits like that, when you, hey, you know, you get wild, he jumped up. The guy did, and he grabbed Papa like that. And so Papa grabbed him back at the neck and just held him there for a while. And I thought, oh, I got out. I said, oh my God, Mama. I said, that man wanted to kill Papa. He did. I know it. I saw it. But the man got well. He said the Lord's Prayer 3 times very, very, very fast. And he never even understood the words. They were so fast. And most of the time, he would hold you the back of your head, the back of the neck, just hold you gently there with his hand on your forehead when he would do this. And he could tell immediately what was wrong with you. Well, a lot of them was like stomach problems. He could look right through you and then he'd tell you what to use, what to take, you know, and come back the next day. This is something that's gifted. It's a gift.
Yeah,
It's a spiritual gift. Not everybody can have it because you're going to have to be, like I said, he was a strong person. He was hard-headed, very hard-headed. When he said no, it meant no. You didn't go twice about it. When it was yes, it was yes. And that's what it took to make him take this thing so that he could get to the people, because a lot of times the people would balk at some things and he says, no, it's not going to be that way. It's going to be this way. You know, and he stuck to his grounds on that. You know, and that was the part that I guess that was foreseen, where he knew he could use it. He would say, okay, what is it today? Where do you hurt? So they would tell. But then when he did this and went through it, then he could see through the whole picture what needed to be done, if they were really hurting there or not, or if they had something else. Could do that, sure. He could also, which I thought was fascinating, here I'm a young girl again, but there was a lady that had this young child, and you know how some mothers are, they don't want children. And he saw that right away through that mother when he touched her. Because the child was sick constantly. Always sick, always sick. But he never told her that. But he told Mom and us. Well, our dinner table was big. And he would tell us a lot of things to Mama. And he said, it's a shame. He said, not a thing I can do about it, but this lady doesn't want this child. And, but the child was sick till he died. But he told them they weren't going to get well. I mean, they were aware of this sort of thing. He said, you know, there's nothing I can do for you anymore. He could tell a lot of times whether he could heal it or not. He knew. But he would do his utmost to make sure they got well or whatever. But then when he came to the end and there was nothing going on, he told me, he says, there's nothing else I can do for you. If you want to, you have, you know, it's your privilege to go ahead and seek another doctor if you like, period. There was a young girl that had pneumonia. She was a Mexican girl. And the parents treated her so badly. They made her sleep on the floor with hardly no covers and stuff like that. And she got pneumonia and died, and I saw her die. Well, this little girl was buried at Thomaston, going like towards Cuero. But then the folks took care of that. They would get the ambulance out there. They'd get the people out there to take them. And you know, sometimes my daddy, when he'd come out of the room, he'd be very hot and sweaty. He'd like to take ice cold bath, just to get over everything he was seeing and telling. Oh, well, because it takes a lot of strength out of you when you do this. A lot of the remedies was like olive oil. Take a lot of olive oil. And a lot of it was sometimes like apple cider vinegar with a warm glass of water with honey in it. Little things like that. Most of it was, I eat lots of olive oil. I used a lot of that too. If you have a very bad cold, when my kids were growing up, you know, good God, it caught one. I'd jerk their little butts up, set them on the counter. I'd say, open your mouth, take this tablespoon of olive oil and suck this lemon and you'll be fine. And they didn't cough the rest of the night. He had a lot of phone calls, lots and lots and lots of phone calls, which he could diagnose over the phone, but would suggest they come in to see him. Yeah, we had our own line, our own private line, because he couldn't, back then, you know, it was like party line thing. Well, he couldn't afford to have that because too many people on the line. So we had our own phone line connected where we had our own private line. But we had to maintain our own side. Oh, yeah, well, we had a little boy. God, I can't even remember what they call it, but you know, the bones are real weak all the time. What do they call that disease? Because the minute he'd walk, he'd fall and break his bones. But he was on a strict diet to get them bones to going. But he was a kid, and he wanted to play with everybody else. And so occasionally his mother wouldn't see him coming out there with us, because we had a playground, big playground, and it was hard as a rock. And we would play marbles out there, we would jump rope out there, we'd play spin top out there, we'd play baseball out there, volleyball, you name it, we did it. And this is part of what he wanted to join. But he had to stay on a strict diet to get them bones going, and off the feet. And that's hard for a child. And these people were Spanish people. They didn't want to stay in a cabin, so Papa let them put up their big tent. He had a place down there for them. and they put up a big tent. The mother was very sick, and I think they stayed there like 2 months. See, here again, the ground got so hard because there's Mexican playing a lot of Mexican music all the time. Well, we go down there at night, and they play their Mexican music. The ground was hot. It was hard as a rock, like a dance floor, and dusty. Didn't bother us a bit hot. Then we got out to the cucaracha. And we danced up a storm. Come home, Mom, and said, "Oh my God," in German again. We're speaking German. "Get them feet washed." And they were just part of the fixture. And they had lantern light everywhere. Oh, like squirrels, peacocks we had, pheasants we had, deer. Deer were always in that park. Ducks, geese, you name it. It was in there. Some snakes that they had, big snakes, things like that. But it was a zoo and the people walked around in it and looked around, you know. And they passed their time, and then it was their time. Here again, that was Opa's job again. It's your time to see Dr. Knocke. He'd go get them. Tell them, yeah, you're, because they'd wander off to their cars. You have to go get them. This right here, the Otto, this here is called the engine room. And this right in here is where we kept our big motors for our light, because we had our own electricity. Back then, electricity was not what we have today. And right in here, and that's what Otto would take care of. And the other side of it, which is on this back side, Mama had Mexican people do our laundry. The whole family of the Mexican people did our laundry. Because then it was the washboard, you know. And they also did our ironing, and that was called the ironing house on this back side. Back in here, you can kind of see, but this little house in front was the wash house where the big pot was. They used to boil their clothes. Boil it. That would be a big pot with the wood, because there's wood underneath that, and they get that boiling water rolling for the sheets, the linen, and your pillowcases, and they dump them in there with bluing, and then they would let that cook real good and take it out, and then put it in 3 tubs of rinsed water, and then hang your clothes on the line. They also kept the wood back in there because they had to, a lot of times, saw wood for like all this kind of stuff. We had wood stove in our big house. We didn't have the electricity thing like that. We had 3 big wood stoves. In the kitchen was one, and then in the hallways. That was it. You know, and if it's cold, that's where you stayed, in that long hallway. Our bedrooms were upstairs. We had one there, and that was it. You know, you warmed up, jumped in bed, and went to sleep, and the hell with it. This here was the garage, because that was, Mama drove a Buick. Papa didn't drive. There was a Buick in here, and here was a pickup truck that they used for hauling stuff. So what he started then, in our hall, in the big house, he had every Thursday night ministering services, and anybody could come. Here again, Otto and a lot of those elderly men, Papa had benches built that we would take everything out of our hall, like the couches and chairs and stuff, and they would put benches in the hallway like this, and Papa would give a sermon. But here again, it did something for Mama, because Papa suggested Mama and Millie and Maggie, Alton, their mother, made sandwiches and things for everybody afterwards. So then it got so crowded in the house, people were standing on the porch, they were standing in the other bedroom, which was not, Mama didn't like, so that's when he built the church. So then we had church services like, not every Sunday, but maybe every other Sunday like that, because these people came from far. Yeah, this was the first church, and we have a new one now. We have a little one. Where that church was located, they had their own home further back, and they lived there. And Otto then would walk to the big house to do his work. You know, they lived there, so whenever she would feel a little something, well, then she would come for treatments, because you could come. Now remember, all of the treatments were free. He did not charge a dime. Whatever you could give, that's what you gave. I can't. Now, Ruby played the mandolin. She played the little mandolin. See, this is our band right here, the red, white, and blue band. They played in that. This is my dad. This is Elmo. That's Frank. That's Otto right there. He should have been Olivia played the piano. Mrs. Grover, that's Mr. Krantz. He was the head music teacher for all of us when we learned. And then when Grover learned, well, then he didn't show up anymore. That's a red, white, and blue band. And they played everywhere. Just any place they wanted, Garfield, Yorktown, wherever these people wanted the red, it was a polka and waltz band. Elmo played the clarinet, and Petty played the trumpet, Olivia played the piano, and Grover played the fiddle, and Mr. Krantz played the drums. But then when this band got started, then Grover took them out for band playing. That's the little one again. That's with Benny Ray or Bootsy. We just called it the junior band. We were just kids, playing around, everything. To me and to us, we never paid attention to any of the patients either. Mama always had a social hour every day. They would do their things in the morning because Mama sold a lot of bread and butter and milk to the patients, eggs and things. And come 2 o'clock after lunch, they would all just kind of clean up, and I can still see my mother in the bathroom, taking her bath, putting on her pretty white dress, combing her hair and powdering her face because, in German I'd say, "Wo gehst du hin?" Und sie hat gesagt, die werden jetzt kommen. Die Menschen werden jetzt kommen. Do you all understand? Okay. Die werden jetzt kommen, wir werden die suchen. And Mama would always make big coffee cakes, coffee cake, apple coffee cake, and the strudel and everything. And then they would sit on the front porch and coffee clutch. Yeah. Sunday dinners were a big thing. A lot of times if people wanted to have dinner with us, when Papa was busy, well, Mama would invite them in. They'd have dinner with us. A lot of them brought food, things like that. It was a huge dining room with a huge table. It would hold 12 people, and then to the side, Mom and them could put some. The porch, it's been remodeled now, our house, but the porch was long like this, back in this way, and they ran all the way back for the treatment porch. And a lot of times on the porch, if a lot of people came, they put tables up out there. And here again, first it was, now we do it all early, let the kids eat first, which is a no-no then. Back then, all the adults sit around the big table. They had a smaller one over here in the kitchen where we kids sat, if it was a big crowd. But if it was just family, then we all sat around the table. And then we were always asked what we did today, what we did in school, and kind of like normal today, just open talk. And we'd sit there for a couple hours. And then we'd listen to what Papa had to say about the patients, and things like that. Mama cooked most of it. But then finally she got Julie, which was her maid, that would help her do this, but Mama would still do it. And then Julie kind of dressed us like for school and curled our hair, and the curling iron then was stuck in a lamp, hot curling iron, and then she'd curl your hair. A lot of times I would move around and she'd burn my head. I would just scream, and I'd just tell her, I don't want curls, I hate curls. But, back then, like Grover would take care of the younger ones, Elmo would. It was passed right on down. Dad was a faith healer. No, he was not. He was a divine healer. Do you have faith in my divine healing? Divine is something beyond medical, believe me. Also, the lame people, hummingbirds come first served. They sat on that, we called it the treatment porch, that one side of the house. And they sat there first come first served. Now these people associated with one another, talked to one another, like a waiting room. But also because every Sunday, the music room, the band played, but in the morning, Sunday morning, there was a hymn sung by everybody. And they could join. They could come and sing along with everybody that was singing. We would trim maybe with little blues or greens, trimming, like Big Rack was very popular back then, and braids and things like that, your pinafores, but the strictly white. I think Ruby's was blue also. Welma's was red, Evelyn's was green, and I think Eileen's was pink. I'm not quite sure, but I think hers was pink. Well, a lot of people came and wanted to know why we was always wearing white. It's to distinguish, but a color also has your character. You know, because some days, you know, now I wear different colors, but some days I'll wear an outfit and think, oh my God, I look like hell. And you'll take it off. Then you'll put on maybe a blue one or a pink one and say, oh yeah, that looks better. That is the character of the day, you know, or of your time, or how you feel. And the color will make you feel good. You know, I can wear a red dress one day and say, hey, I look super, you know. I'll wear that dress next week and think, oh, it looks like yellow. So then it was kind of like, well, you make your choice. You know, you make your choice. If you want to wear a yellow dress, you wear a yellow dress. We were vegetarians, okay? Nobody else was. We were. Today, too many people eat red meat, and a lot of your cancer's coming from that. My mother, I saw her when she passed away, just quietly went away. Where she lived, right where the big house is, my sister had inherited a place when Papa passed away, and she lived with Becky for a long time. So we was all then, you know, getting married and having our own and everything. And then the house got too big, and that's when Elmo said, well, all right, then we'll just move into the big house and everything. And then Becky had a smaller home, because Richard had his own insurance company, also had a band which traveled. And then they just took, this is, well, we'll just take care of him with the ear, you know, with us. Because Becky didn't have children. Papa was kind of heavy set too, and his exercise was very limited. And he should have had more, which he didn't. And then that trip didn't do him a bit of good. Now, he had a lot of farms, like a meadow and tomato farms, corn farms, a lot of farms that he would go occasionally and walk it. And that was kind of his exercise, more or less. This Sweet Home was one. We had a molasses farm where we had the molasses press, grew the cane to make molasses. That's right above where Lange's lived, right up the road, Papa Buck's property there. And then the meadow was way out at Hope, Texas. The meadows were the hay meadow, where we made hay to stick in the barn for the dairy cattle. All of that. And many a time, Bootsy and I were the ones back then. Today we have the machines. Okay, you didn't have machines back then. You had this horse that had this little press that this horse had to go around and around and around while they were sticking the hay in this press. And when that bale came out, then there was a guy standing there, or two of them, would grab that bale and tie the wire around it to hold the hay together. And Bootsy and I would be the one that have to run the horse around and around. And kids as we are, you know, we would have horses there to ride. So Bootsy says, I'm not going to do it today, and you do it. He said, I'm going to ride my horse. And I said, the hell with this, man? No, and then I said, no, sir. I said, you get your booty out there. And I said, you can ride your horse first. And then when I get tired, then you're going to do the hay thing, and I'm going to ride horseback. With the farm, the tomatoes, he sold the tomatoes. The corn, he sold the corn. He sold the molasses. We sold the milk from the dairy, the butter, things like that. You know, sold. And the sheep, we had a lot of sheep. Matter of fact, that was one of Bootsy's jobs to herd the sheep. Also, they cut the wool, they sell the wool. You know, that's where it all came from. But Grover had a workshop where he worked with wood. And he would make furniture or different things. So he would go down there and smoke. It was far away from the house. Here Boots and me again, or some of the others, we'd go and say, oh, he'd say, you want a puff? Because he knew just, you know, and I'd say, yeah, why not? Let's have a puff. So that one day the hay was all being baled in the barn. Then we had hay that was stacked right down here for the cattle because they didn't have room in the barn. And Boots and I said, hey, let's go sit and back the hay and let's smoke a cigarette. Said, okay, so by God, we lit one up, we sat there, but we didn't think for a minute when we threw the match away what it would do. It caught all of it on fire. Boy, did we scatter. I scattered one way and he scattered the other. Boy, I bet I sat in that closet for I don't know how damn long before I came out. I don't know, are y'all familiar with Yoakum? Okay, back at the tannery there was some property. Spanish people owned it, and they had this big dance hall. But those people that owned it got sick, and they asked Papa if he wanted to buy it. Papa said, well, yeah, so he bought it. Well, they just came back from California. He went to California, and this guy had, he was dying of cancer anyway, but he called Papa and wanted him to come up and treated, which he should have never gone, because back then flying was not a big thing.
No.
You went on a train or a bus. That's a long way to go. And they stayed there, I guess a month, because these people were very wealthy, and they had a lot of property, and they had a lot of apartments, and they let them have an apartment while he was up there. And so when he got back, I think he was just tired, but we had a dance that night.
Yeah.
He told Mama, he said, I don't really feel like going, but everybody was so eager to see him back. And she said, well, go for a little while anyway. She said, everybody's excited about seeing you back. So he did, he went. But he was dancing with another lady when he fell. Our band was playing, Red, White, Blue band was playing. The set was finished, and he was taking her back to her bench. There was no tables in the dance hall. Back then it was benches all the way around. So he took her back to her bench, but before he got there, he fell. He just passed out and fell. And so at first we didn't think anything of it. And she says, Mr. Knocke, are you okay? Are you okay? Papa didn't answer. So she said, oh my God. So she called Elmo and all of them, and they went down and said, oh, he's done gone. So it was a heart attack right there. Well, we did keep him there 30 days because he had so many people coming in all the time. So that was between the family and Mama. I said, do we want to keep him there this long? Or do you want to bury him the next day or the day after? And so people said, well, we want to see Dr. Knocke. We want to see Dr. Knocke. So they went for 3 days.
Shall we dance? I ask with a smile, 'cause I've been watching you for a good long while. Let's take a chance, take a spin or two, 'cause I would sure like the chance to dance with you. We cried, we pleaded, we prayed how we needed this not to be true, but the angels were waiting their turn. The angels were waiting their turn. The angels were waiting their turn to dance with you. With you. With you.